A map editor has to be one of the most requested features I've heard of for Overwatch, and with a community as passionate as Overwatch is, it's no surprise that there are map makers ready to start producing content for this game. Well, Jeff Kaplan on the Blizzard forums has confirmed that yes, there will be a map editor for Overwatch. Let's talk about this. Some of the most successful games of all time were created with a map editor or some kind of modding tools that allowed the users to create maps or new game modes within the game. These games include Garry's mod, Counter-Strike, and a whole bunch of other, mainly Valve games because they're the only company that likes to release map editors. Well, Blizzard is going to be the next company on that list because they're going to release a map editor for Overwatch. And a map editor could immensely benefit the game in many different ways. If you could create your own maps, you would be able to try out many different styles of gameplay and many different ways to play as heroes in these new maps. For example, every map in Overwatch is focused around these choke points. If you could create your own maps, you would be able to modify existing maps and you would be able to test out new ideas for these choke points. For example, if you created a gigantic choke point and you allowed for multiple heroes to be played on that map, it would be pretty meta for two Reinhardts perhaps to set up a huge shield there and maybe even an Orisa on top of that, creating a huge kind of shield defense matrix area. And that's just one example of something that you could do. That's just off the top of my head. The map editor would open up possibilities to Overwatch that were never originally intended by Blizzard. The game would become and exist in such a way that Blizzard never actually wanted for Overwatch to be played that way, but if the community wants to try something, it will happen, and a map editor will certainly allow for such possibilities. Now, Jeff Kaplan on the forums did actually confirm this map editor. Months and months ago, there was somebody on the forums asking about custom games being open to the public with a server browser, being able to host their own brawls, and Jeff Kaplan really liked this idea. And of course, now we do have a server browser. What he said back then was, we're very interested in the concept of enabling players to make custom games open to the public. We have time schedules to explore this, and we're pretty excited about it. So he couldn't say it at the time, but they were working on the server browser, and now we do have it. Now this brings us to what Jeff Kaplan said just the other day on the forums. Responding to a post on a thread that was about a week old and nobody had looked at it, he said, "We're extremely open-minded about releasing a map editor for Overwatch someday. But because Overwatch was made with a brand new engine, this is not a small task or one which can happen anytime soon. We have this on our long-term roadmap and believe heavily in user-made content. But there are many challenges ahead of us, and it will be a very long road before our editor can be made available to the public." Now, what he means by this is when they made Overwatch, they completely built the game from the ground up, instead of using something like Unreal Engine 4, which is an engine that is already pre-made for the game to be built on. This means that there is really no engine to work with and no tools for users to create maps with, how there is a Source engine and an Unreal editor as well as a Unity editor for most games. Overwatch doesn't have that, which means that if you want to have tools to build maps with, Blizzard is going to have to build them on their own time for the benefit of the game. Now, this is no small task. Creating tools that are streamlined for users and they're not developers of the game, to do this is really difficult. You'll have to basically water down and baby the player's ability to make maps. And while you probably have a lot of users who are familiar with things like the Source engine, which is how you mod games like Counter-Strike and Garry's mod, it's not going to be so easy to do it in Overwatch because their engine is completely custom. Their way of handling textures, models, buildings, and everything, they're completely different from most other games. So to make this work with players, they're going to have to figure out something to make it actually function properly. Now, the kind of features that you could expect from an Overwatch editor would be pretty similar to most other editors in the game industry. In the Source engine, you create blocks and you apply textures to them, kind of like Minecraft in a way, but you can change the size and shape of the blocks and you can make them look like whatever you want with textures applied to them, kind of like skins. And once you do that, you can add more complicated models on top of it. So you could start with a block, then add a fence on top of it, and then a roof model, and suddenly you've kind of created a little gazebo or house. This would work in Overwatch definitely, because if you look at the structure of the map, It is completely composed of models as well as blocks with textures. It's a very, very good way to make a map, but it looks like Overwatch is a little more complicated than just straight up blocks. It has sort of slanted angles and more complex geometry. And while most of these are probably custom models, the block system looks like it's going to be a bit more complicated than the source engines. It's no small feat to create something that fits in with the Overwatch art style, so if custom assets are to be produced by modders and custom map makers, they're probably going to have to try pretty hard to make it fit in with the Overwatch's art style, which is quite unique. I would be really surprised if the first modders and map makers for Overwatch actually managed to nail the art style. I have a feeling that's going to have to come about in later on when players actually have discovered how to manage the art style and make everything fit in, because even with the fan art in Overwatch right now, the art style is pretty hard to recognize. Most people just decide that, oh, this is how one thing looks, I'm not going to pay attention to the Overwatch art style at all, and I'm just going to kind of do my own thing. So custom maps and stuff will make the game look really strange, and I have high hopes that Blizzard is going to manage this and not worry too much that the style of their game is being destroyed by map makers with low work ethic who just want to quickly produce like a giant map that's like 3 colors. It's like solid brown, solid red, and solid blue, and it looks like the map was made in Microsoft Paint. So hopefully Blizzard will create a way to manage content and keep the low-hanging fruit away from most players. Anyway, there's not any more information on the map editor at this time, and likely there won't be a lot of information for quite some time, but you can always hope that Blizzard's going to release their map editor sometime soon. But hopefully Blizzard will release the map editor sometime this year if we're lucky, but of course that is just speculation and hope. Anyway, that's all I've got for this video. If you enjoyed, I would love it if you'd leave a like, and I would especially enjoy it if you subscribed, because I'll be producing content like this multiple times a week, and you can expect good content coming out of my channel regularly. Anyway, that's all for now. I'm Rejected Shotgun, signing off.